we need to have a serious conversation about holding people accountable for workplace abuse. It's not as simple as like move away from them or change your job. It really does affect you to the point where it destroys you psychologically.
Okay, I have a lot to say about this topic. Please go watch that video. It's linked in my caption. And that's my mutual Evan. Unbelievable content. If you're not following, please follow. But they asked me to talk about this workplace abuse and why a lot of men do this, and just kind of what I talk about and how that might relate to this. So I have several things to say, and not just from like a wider lens, but also from like the personal experiences of people I love. And my husband actually went through this. So I also just want to put it out there that obviously it's not just men doing this. One of my closest friends is a very confident woman, and she has never had a female boss that didn't torture her because she was very threatened by how confident she was. And like all of them have literally been the villain in her life because they couldn't handle the fact that she would not operate like a, and she's just very direct, very confident, always respectful. And a lot of women hated that. Every one of her bosses. Ugh. So, this is across gender, right? And men can be on the receiving end of this, like my husband, and I can get into that in a minute. But my initial thoughts on this is, first of all, and I said that in the comments, that a lot of men, they relive their fantasy of, like, especially if they were dorks in high school, or whatever, made fun of. They have a revenge fantasy, right? And unfortunately, if these men ever become bosses, that revenge fantasy plays out at work of anyone they have power over. Again, it's not just men, but men are, raised to be more violent and more entitled, especially cishet men, especially white men and white people too, overall, right? That's in me, deconstructing all that. And so you'll know that I make a lot of videos about how a lot of these men, they do that in their relationships at home, right? It's like they're, no one who's not a Gen X, like Back to the Future, Biff is the big bully, and, George McFly is the dork. And a lot of these Biffs want a live-in dork they can beat up all the time. And the dork is their wife. The dork is their children, especially their wife. And that's why they play pranks. That's why they're mean. That's why they do all this stuff to humble her, and blah, 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 in addition to all the other reasons. But one of the reasons is they just want revenge. Right? They want power. They were promised power. They were promised this, right? And then they go out in the world and they're like, and especially if they have like a boss or like other people who are, have control over their lives. I mean, who doesn't under capitalism? Then they usually take that humiliation out on people in their home. But what happens with men who don't have anyone at home to do that? Or they don't have a roommate, or they don't have somebody in direct close proximity to them that takes who they can, continue the cycle of violence with, right? They'll get beat up. Now I got to take it out on someone else. What happens if they don't have that person at home? Well, God forbid you work for them, because the people who work under them are going to get that wrath. Now, maybe they're going to get that anyway if that person has someone at home. But what I'm saying is that so many men are pissed that they don't have power over somebody. And so they cling to it and they take it out on anyone at work. And that story that Evan told is horrifying. And yet it's also not that uncommon. And then, of course, the more intersections you're at, the more likely you are to be on the receiving end of people like that, right? The less privilege you have also makes you more vulnerable to all of that, right? With zero consequence. Now, I've never had an abusive boss or coworker, like one who literally tortured me. Like so many people know that experience. But, as a woman who worked in the as a raft guide, ski industry, the outdoor adventure world, lots of very toxic bro bras. And they tortured me at work. And I loved them, which made it even worse. I was like, I'm just a kid sister. And I wrote about this for Outside Magazine. And I've talked about it plenty before. Of just being, one of the only women. And so therefore you kind of put up with a lot of shit. And then it's like, can't beat them, join them. Of course, I never bullied them back. But I just almost became a different person to survive in this environment of all men and all like King Kong, look at me, right? And they would roll me in the dirt right before the customers would show up. They would, lock me in the outhouse and throw rocks down the pipes of blue water full of God knows what splashed all over me, right? They drew, Mel loves murder on the back of my calves when they found out I hooked up with someone from another company and I couldn't get it off as an impermanent. Like they literally tortured me at work. But I was like, I'm just a sister. I never had a brother. It's all fun. It's all good fun. I would pretend like it didn't bother me. I worked at another company and this short guy with all kinds of addictions, because that industry tends to attract men with addictions because escapism and all that stuff and adrenaline, right? Dude, like being alone at work with a man like that, with a massive hormone, very uncomfortable for me, especially because I was younger. Like I have so many stories like that. But to me, that's not even like abuse. Like it's abuse, but it's not like torture, like from one person. But what I saw my husband go through, I was like, holy crap, workplace abuse it's different than like domestic violence and partner abuse. And yet the outcome is not all that different sometimes. I mean, it's very different, but there's a lot of overlap, right? He actually left with burnout and we had to do an intervention to convince him to leave because he was really in an abusive relationship at work, but he was trying to protect everybody else. And so his fear of he felt like a big brother at work protecting everyone else and just taking it, And I literally was like, please, I can't handle this anymore. I can't watch them do this to you. It is too painful. Like I've had many conversations and it took an intervention with a bunch of friends, including me, to really put it out there. And he immediately was like, okay. Like, it's just, the way that we gaslight ourselves, whether we're in an abusive relationship at work or in a friendship or in a home or partner or whatever, the way we talk ourselves out of it, we always have a reason to not take it seriously. And then we start believing what they say, because we're not perfect and we make mistakes. And we'll take this one thing and be like, well, they were right about that because they're so good at, giving you just a little bit of good stuff and then wham! Right? And so when he finally got out of that, it took him almost a year to recover fully. Now, it's still not comparable to, getting raped by your partner and all the stuff that comes with domestic violence. Because, by the way, I hate that we don't talk about this, but if you were in an abusive relationship, emotionally or anything, that involves rape. You can't say no if you're scared. That's great. I don't know why we don't talk about that more. It drives me crazy. So when it's with a partner, of course, that you also have schmegsual violence, rape is a part of that experience, right? So he doesn't have that level, but waking up in cold sweats, nightmares, feeling demoralized, feeling like all of the things, like watching him recover from this workplace abuse was really like insightful to me. And it was also horrifying to watch. Because it was almost like I had to relive my own by watching him go through it, which also helped me empathize with like younger Melanie. Like, dang, I can't believe I got through that, right? That once you get out, it's like you got to get out, but that's where like the pain really starts because you've been in survival mode, right? You've just been pretending like it's okay. So when you get out and then you're safe, that's when like the nightmares and all of the stuff. The voices their voices are in your head and they live there and they have a bullhorn, right? And it's so hard to quiet those voices. And especially if it was like at a job where maybe you really liked your boss or really liked the job, right? How many artists have stopped pursuing their life's passion because someone abusive in the I was in improv in New York and there was some teachers who did some messed up stuff, especially to the younger women. Shocker, right? But also to people from all the more marginalized groups, right? There were so many problems in these schools. And think about how many people will just kill your dream at your dream job or your dream profession because of one person. So I really wish we talked more about workplace abuse because it is life ruining. It leads to people taking their lives, like they were talking about in that video. Some people never recover, and most people it takes a long time, and yet there's no consequences.